Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Reno Beninati. I am with the Greenspan Company, Adjusters International. We are licensed from state to state by the Department of Insurance, and we're known as public adjusters, private adjusters, advocates for the people. We are a Bay Area company. We are not some out-of-state vendor or a disconnected resource from the community. This is our backyard. To quickly qualify myself, I have been a public advocate, public adjuster for the last 24 years of my life. I too am a fire victim, and this is how I got into the industry and never looked back. As a firm, we've been involved in pretty much every firestorm in recent California history. We continue to provide meaningful education to policyholders on how to best have the policy respond to the loss when these events happen. Now more than ever, you guys are going to need as much information as you can to help yourselves through making good business decisions for you and your families. And we're here to provide just that, an education. I'm hopeful that by the end of the workshop, you'll have a much better understanding as to how your particular policy will respond to the different parts of the claims process and help you through with recovery. We're here to answer hard questions, the ones you can't typically ask the insurance adjuster, because you may have a strategy in mind that you don't feel like you feel safe enough to really discuss because you don't know what the outcome would be or how that will turn out. Before we begin, we are going to mute everybody, and please mute yourselves as well to prevent any background noise. We will have a Q&A, and the best way to do it, we found over the course of doing these, is to use the little chat box down below. And after the workshop slide presentations and the information that I'll provide, I will be happy to answer the questions, and I'll do my very, very best to answer each and every question. I just want to mention something before we start, before we begin. Over the next year or two, everyone impacted has two goals. One involves money and financial recovery, and the other involves family and emotional recovery. My experience is that many people who place their primary focus on the financial recovery have families who suffer as a result. Conversely, those who put emotional recovery first and foremost sometimes suffer financially. Insurance companies only need to focus on the financial part, and they are a huge adversary. So understanding all aspects is critical for both financial and emotional success. Let's get you guys the information that you need. And before I begin, I want to, with the slides, I want to help you understand a couple of things that are very important. Number one, it is really critical that you order a certified copy of your insurance policy. And most of you probably have one or two pages. It's the declarations page, which shows the numbers. But what you know, all the information is just not on that. There is other coverages that can and should be unlocked in the body of the policy. Things like landscape coverage, debris removal, etc. And we'll be covering those. So please order a certified copy of your insurance policy. It should be anywhere between 40 to 80 pages deep. And that is the rule book, folks. If you don't have the rule book, you are not in the game. The insurance adjuster may be citing eventually certain conditions, certain things in the policy when you're trying to negotiate. And if you don't have the contract of insurance in front of you, you're going to be at a disadvantage because you cannot reference what they're talking about. So again, very important to have the rule book with you and understand it. The other thing I want to mention is that there are 4 buckets of coverage. This is how a homeowner's policy breaks down. And those 4 buckets are usually listed on your policy as A, B, C, and D. Now, A is the dwelling. I like to call them buckets of coverage. You can call them what you like, but we're going to use the term buckets for now. So A is dwelling, the first bucket. And that's usually, that's covering your ceilings, floors, and walls, and the actual structure of the house itself. A B, or the second bucket, is other structures, and that's anything that's unattached to the main dwelling. Fences, retaining walls, workshops, etc. We'll be, again, visiting that and talking about the nuances of that claim. The third claim is the personal property bucket of coverage. And then the fourth bucket of coverage is your loss of use. Now that you've lost use of your house, you have coverage there as well. Each bucket of coverage is separate. They get paid separately. They have nothing really to do with each other, and they have to be prepared, presented, and negotiated. There's language that talks about each bucket in the body of the policy, hence the reason you want to have the whole policy with you eventually, if not now, so that you can start to understand how each bucket has sublimits and different obligations that you have to meet, that the insurance company has to meet. And so it's really critically important. So let's begin. On the first slide here, you'll see a pie chart. So if you were to look at your claim as a pie, it would kind of look like this. The blue, the large blue section there, the light blue, is a dwelling basic limit. A basic limit is basically the first part of the dwelling coverage. And the next color down, the teal color, is the dwelling extended limit. Now, I'll be getting into these terms and these types of definitions and such that you're going to be hearing. You'll have a better understanding by the time the workshop's over. But the extended limit is the teal, and that's a good big piece of the pie as well. The other big piece, there's the maroon colored personal property. Next to that, you'll see ACV. That means the actual cash value. Personal property RC holdback, the red, that talks about depreciation and how the insurance company is able to withhold a certain amount of money. And I'll get into the specifics of that as we go along through the slides. Separate structures, that's bucket B. It is the light brown one. Code upgrades is another part of the bucket, or the pie. And that's talking about bringing your dwelling and your other structures up to today's standards, otherwise known as ordinance or law in the policy. The purple is ALE, which stands for additional living expense. That is your temporary housing money that's available. The green sliver there is debris removal, very hot topic at these firestorms. You're going to be dealing with debris removal, and we will talk about how that plays a role and what's going to happen there moving forward. And then, of course, there's trees, and that's your bushes, trees, shrubs, things like that. So let's dive into bucket A. That's the big one. So you all have three scenarios that you're going to fall under, or three options. Option one is you're going to choose not to rebuild. The second option is you're going to go buy a replacement property somewhere else that's already built, a home that's already there with the landscaping. The third option is you're going to rebuild on site. Now, depending on what you choose to do out of these three options will dictate how the policy will respond under coverage A. This first column, no rebuild, basically you have your base limit. Now, 600,000 is a number we just picked arbitrarily, and so we're going to just use that for the duration of the workshop. That is considered your base limit. Now, if it can be proven that the damages to the dwelling are greater than 600,000, then an additional 5% for debris removal is available, and that's that $30,000. Now, keep in mind that debris removal is part of reconstruction, so it's built into the base limit of 600 typically. And so the only way to unlock it as additional coverage, you have to prove to the insurance company that your damages are greater than whatever your base limit is. And then that bucket opens up, or you unlock the debris removal coverage. It's very important to understand that. The other additional coverage is 5% for landscaping. And that talks about bushes, trees, and shrubs. Some policies are 500 per tree, per bush, per shrub. Some are 750. And so for those of you with acreage, it's important to count the trees, count the shrubs, because you're entitled to this money. And the firestorms usually wipe out the whole area. And so you want to make sure you're going to get paid for that. This is a coverage as additional coverage that you don't have to unlock. It's simply 5% of the base limit, and that's how you get to the 30,000. Now, the second option is if you purchase a replacement property, again, a house that's already built somewhere else. And by the way, folks, you can buy it wherever you want. You don't have to stay here. You can go to Washington, across the country. These benefits will follow you. Base limit, again, is 600. The debris removal hasn't changed. The landscaping remains the same. Here's what's changed: the extended replacement cost endorsement. I have talked to no less than maybe 200 people that have called in for information, and I'm shocked that they do not recognize that this is in their policy. Almost 95% of the policies out there have this extended replacement cost endorsement, which kicks up as additional coverage over the base limit. Now, not all policies have this. Companies like California Fair Plan, not there. Sometimes American Modern, there's some surplus lines coverages. Lloyd's of London, for example, they don't have these extended replacement cost endorsements in their policy, so you want to look for it. I'm just going to grab a sip of water here. Okay, so how do you get the extended replacement cost? Well, you have to unlock it. You have to show or prove that the measurable loss of your dwelling is above 600,000 after you apply depreciation. Depreciation is taken for age, wear and tear of the building, obsolescence, things of that nature. And so that is going to be taking off the base limit. So for example, if you have a measurable loss to your dwelling of $700,000 and depreciation is $50,000, now you're at $650,000. Well, you've unlocked the extended replacement cost endorsement, and now that door opens up to the additional money. Now, in this example, we're showing 50% as an extension. Some policies are 20%, some policies are 25%, some are 50, some are 100. So it's really important to look at that and look for that coverage. It really makes a big difference between your ability to recover from this. There's some policies. The next line is additional increase due to declared catastrophe. So there are policies like Safeco. I've seen one recently at the firestorm that kicked up all the limits of insurance 100%. So if you can imagine, you have 600,000. Now you have 1.2 million. And there are limited companies that have this. It's a great thing to have if it's available. Like I said, the only one I know of right now that I've seen is a Safeco policy that had this deluxe endorsement put in it. Now, again, some are 50%, some kick up the numbers 100%. Very important and a great coverage to have. The last line item there is code, otherwise known as ordinance and law coverage. That is the amount of money that's in a separate sub-limit of insurance to bring your property up to code. Now, the codes are mandated by the counties, and they vary. So for you folks in Vacaville, it may be completely different than the folks in the Santa Cruz area. So the insurance company owes you for the as was, what you had 1 minute before the fire hit, and the additional cost it's going to cost to bring your home up to code up to the limit that's available in your policy. Now, in most homeowner policies, the limit on code is typically 10% additional stackable coverage above the base limit. Now, policies like AAA, for example, have it built in to the limit of the base limit. So, for example, it says something to the effect of you can use up to 10% of coverage A for code. So that means in this example, you only really have 540 plus the 60 would be your code up to 600,000. So you want to look for that information to see if in fact it is additional coverage or if it's built into the limit of the policy. And look, codes are going to be interesting, and they've changed over the years. There's an example of codes, but this isn't limited to because they're changing. Things like energy efficiency, Title 24, low flow sinks and low flow toilets, etc., for water conservation. There's fireproof decks and roofing materials. You've got retrofitting for earthquake, shear walls and such. So sprinklers for inside the house. And so the codes will dictate, the county will dictate what those code triggers will be, and you need to conform in an effort to rebuild your house. And so what you don't want to have happen is where you have a code trigger of $100,000, and in this example, you only have 60,000. Well, you're going to have to pull money from other buckets of coverage in your claim. You can certainly do that, move the money around as needed. For example, use some personal property coverage money to make up for any shortfalls that you may or may not have. So that's the second option. The third option is if you rebuild on site. Everything really remains the same. There's no changes there. So what you give up if you don't rebuild is the extended replacement cost endorsement. The insurance company doesn't have to pay you if you don't expend the money or if you don't perform. But performing means that you have to rebuild. So you may get the base limit, but then the policy says that when you spend up to whatever that extended replacement cost dollar is, then we'll pay it. So you have to incur. Now, there's one or two companies we've seen over the years that will pay it without performing. And I don't want to get into specifics here. I need to speak in general terms because everybody has different policies with different companies. So you also leave behind the code if you choose not to rebuild. That's a use it or lose it bucket, folks. And so the insurance companies are smart. If you're going to cash out and walk away and go live in Pismo Beach in a bungalow on the water, and you're just going to rent it for the rest of your living days, the insurance company is going to keep the code and the extension on that. So this is what coverage A looks like. The next bucket of coverage is bucket B, and that talks about your other structures. And again, anything that's detached from your dwelling, things like fences, detached retaining walls, garages, workshops, walkways and driveways that get impacted. Look, keep in mind that if the driveway is spalled, meaning that it got so hot that it wicks up the moisture out of the concrete, it's no longer able to, the tensile strength, so to speak, of the concrete's no longer able to support the weight it had been. So you got to look at this stuff when you're making a claim to make sure that you're including all the damaged areas. It may not be evident, but spalling is important to look at, not only on the foundation of your slab. Look, if it's burnt to the ground, more than likely you're going to have to completely get a new slab for your foundation of the dwelling. But look at the walkways, look at the driveways. If they can be salvaged, great. If not, then you want to claim it. Now, coverage B typically runs 10% of coverage A. So in this example, that's how we got the 60,000, which is 10% of 600,000. Some policies give you 20% of coverage A. So again, look at the policy. You may or may not have extended replacement cost available under other structures, which would be great because we find that a lot of these rural areas that these firestorms where they happen, people build workshops. They build these big, they have these big barns and workshops and big garages that they have their implements in and such. And we find that typically there's pretty big shortfalls in coverage in Bucket B. I'm hopeful that if you did build a workshop, you told your agent and they came out and said, hey, you need more insurance, and they upped that. So you could always buy additional coverage B coverage. And so I've seen a handful of people, their policies that had much greater limits than 10 or even 20% because they had built a workshop and they insured it accordingly. So if you have extended replacement cost available under Bucket B, then you wanna know it and go for it. Debris removal also is, you're entitled to 5% because look, the debris field is not just the dwelling, it's the workshop, it's the garage, it's the the driveways, walkways, outbuildings, etc. So you have an additional 5% available there. And if you are going to build your garage, your separate garage or workshop, you have to bring it up to code. So code coverage, you want to see if you have it available there as well. $6,000, which equals 10% of the $60,000, and that's how we arrived at the $69,000. Now, before I go on to personal property, I do want to mention something that's really, really important. For those of you with a mortgage, it is really, really important that you contact the loss draft department at the mortgage company. And loss draft, it's not lost with a T, it's with an S, L-O-S-S as in Sam. And this is a little department in the back of every mortgage company. And what their job is to take in settlement checks from floods, earthquakes, whatever settlements are coming in on that particular property, and to process them and get them back out to you so you can make your repairs. Now, you want to ask them what their protocol is in an effort to release the monies back to you once that money gets in their account. And so what typically happens is when the check comes in for the dwelling and other structures, it'll be made out to your name or as the named insured is listed on the policy, and it'll also be made out to the mortgage company. They have what's called an insurable interest up to the amount of the note and no more than that. So because you have a partner, look, they lent you the money to buy the property, so they have to have an insurable interest in it. And so the only way they protect themselves is by being named on the check. And so if you fast forward and now you have your settlement check, it's made out to you in the bank, you're going to endorse it, you're going to send it into lost draft, and they will put it into usually an escrow account. And it sits there until you provide them with either, usually it's two things is what they want. One, a licensed contractor's contract filled out properly, and the adjustment figures of how those numbers came to be. And those are typically the two things that they're going to need to release the money back to you. Now, they don't just release it all, folks. They usually release it in thirds. Find out what their protocol is. Be proactive. Call them as soon as you can. Let them know the house is damaged and there's going to be a settlement check. They may send out a package for you to fill out, and that way you're being proactive and your file's set up. So when the check comes in, you're good to go. You don't want to do that at the backside of this process because it may take 30, 45 days to get things aligned at the lost draft department. That's really, really important. I want to talk about debris removal before we move on. Debris removal is a hot topic, and we don't know yet, it's too soon, which way the county will move. Will they have a supplemented program where Cal, for example, in some of these firestorms, we saw Cal Recycle come on board and they do the job. They come out and they'll do the debris removal on your lot. And then they submit a bill maybe 12, 13, 14 months later. And the debris removal money coming out of your other structures and your dwelling goes to them. And then if there's if the bill is bigger, obviously, or much greater than the limit of insurance that's available for debris removal, then the government will subsidize it. And so for an example would be, let's say the average lot, I'll tell you folks, a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot house that's burnt to the ground, it could cost $50,000, $60,000. Now, if the county just does a blanket hazmat where they deem every lot is hazmat, it could be more than that. So if you only have, in our example, I think it was $30,000 for debris removal, which represented 5% of the base limit, and the bill comes in for $50,000, they're going to take the $30,000 from the policy because they did the work and they earn it, and then the other $20,000 gets supplemented by the state or the government, whichever one party is going to pay. And so if they roll out a subsidized debris removal program, I would urge you to sign up for it, because you don't want to start paying out of pocket. It'll diminish the amount of money that you otherwise would have to rebuild your structure, your home, and other structures. So I thought that was a very important thing to mention. And get on the county website. This stuff takes time. You got FEMA out there, you've got the county doing their thing, and until these fires are out and they can assess what's going on safely, you may not know. But again, keep your ear to the ground and see if you can find out about that. So next slide is the personal property claim, and this one, folks, will take years off your life if it's not handled properly. The reason is it is personal. It's personal property. It's one of the longest, hardest, most arduous tasks you will be faced with in the months ahead. The way personal property works on the dollar limit is we're just showing a 50% limit. So we took 50% of the 600,000. That's how we came up with this number of 300,000. Some policies have that, they'll have 75% of coverage A. So take a look at that, and that's the limit there. So there's your base limit. Now there's a thing called sublimits, and sublimits are, if you see there on the second line, it's BPP. That's business personal property. For those of you that have businesses that you're running out of your workshops, or you're working out of your home, there's a limitation, there's a limit on the amount of money that the insurance company will pay. Some policies have $1,000, some have up to $5,000 for business personal property. The reason they limit it, folks, is because they want you to buy more insurance. They want you to buy a business owner's policy to protect the business property. So take a look at that. We have had a lot of call-ins with this question, and we have seen a lot of people in these rural areas run their businesses on the property in their workshops. So this could be an impact. Watercraft are subject to sublimits, cash, collectibles, excuse me, things like coin collections, comic book collections, baseball cards, things like that. They put these limitations. So when you look in the policy under sublimits, under personal property, you will see exactly the amount of monies that your specific policy will have limitations on. Now, the next line, scheduled items, those are jewelry, furs, gun collections, whatever you might have out there that you wanted to insure additionally above the personal property limit. That's called a schedule item in our industry. So be aware of that. Look, oftentimes people took out the policy 10, 12 years ago, and they forgot that they had bought additional coverage, and over the years it just keeps renewing. And so take a look at the whole declarations page, because usually that's where it will be. Your items will be listed there as scheduled and with a dollar figure next to it. In the red, you see ACV versus RCV. ACV means actual cash value. RCV is replacement cost value, and then there's depreciation. So in California, most of you have replacement cost policies, but the definition of replacement cost in California is replacement cost less depreciation equals actual cash value. And if I put some numbers to it, it looks like this. Let's say you're claiming a couch or an item for $1,000. And it is subject to depreciation for wear and tear, age, condition, etc. And so that'll drive that replacement cost value down. So let's say for that $1,000 couch at today's replacement cost, they take $200 off, the insurance company does, for depreciation. Now, you get an actual cash value check for $800. Well, the question is, what happened to my other $200? Well, the insurance company has the right to hold it. That's called a depreciation holdback. Now, they will give it back to you once you demonstrate that you've replaced the couch, in this example, for $1,000 or more. So once you hand in that receipt, then they'll release the $200. I'm here to tell you, folks, if you get into this cat and mouse game with the insurance company, you're going to lose a few years off your life and a few hairs off your head, like I did. So the bottom line is, to avoid that nonsense, you want to use a different strategy. Now, we'll use this $300,000 limit, for example. If you can put together an inventory, and look, your home could have anywhere between 2,000 and 4,000 line items of merchandise in it. When you want to be very detailed, you want to count the toothpicks, the thumbtacks, and everything in between. And so, because the goal is to exceed the limit of insurance so that they pay you all of it. And the way that looks is, for example, if you can do an inventory, and let's, for example, say your inventory came up to $450,000 at replacement cost. And of course, it's subject to depreciation. And let's say they take $100,000 off for depreciation. Now you're at $350,000 actual cash value. Well, that $350,000 reduced number is higher than the base limit of $300,000. They owe you all of it, and that's how they commit to paying you the rest. What that does is it avoids the handing in of the receipts, or the tit for tat that you'll get into for years with the insurance company. You don't want to get into that game. It's a losing battle. Most people give up. If you don't replace the items, the insurance company gets to keep that depreciation money. So be aware of how that works. So again, it starts at replacement cost. You want to add tax, you want to add delivery or setup, and even warranties. If you have some items that you bought warranties on electronics, for example, that's a true picture of what you lost. And so, so the devil's in the details. Next slide will show just some questions that typically people will ask. Do I need to list every item? And the answer is yes. A lot of people get lazy and they leave a lot of dollars on the table for themselves because it is work. How do I list every item? Well, you can list where it was purchased. That's important because you want to create a narrative with the insurance company to show what your buying habits are, what your shopping habits are. Because if you don't do that narrative, then they can just go out and price it on directbuy.com or some direct warehouse pricing, which is probably a lot cheaper than if you bought from your local stores, et cetera, because you may shop locally to support your local businesses. And this is an important factor in substantiating and defending your position of why they shouldn't be pricing them lower for the same item. How much does it cost when I purchased it? Well, it really doesn't matter there, because the bottom line is they owe you for what it costs today to replace. You may have bought something on sale because you're a smart consumer, but today it's not on sale anymore when you go to replace it. So that's why you want to list it at replacement cost, not what you paid for it years ago. Does it matter? Yes, everything matters. When it comes to money matters, money matters. So you want to get it done right. Number three, what is a holdback and how does it work? We just talked about that. These three terms below all mean the same thing: full replacement value holdback, depreciation holdback, withheld depreciation. Those are the terminologies that you're going to be faced with, and you'll see on the summary sheets of these insurance settlements. You'll hear the adjusters from the insurance company using these words. These are, if you've never been in this major claims processing game, the bottom line is you're going to be dealing with a new language. And tonight we wanted to bring that stuff to light so that you're not caught off guard and that you can have a substantive conversation with the adjuster and be an educated policyholder. The snippet below in the light blue shows just what a very, again, it's just a very small snippet of what an inventory would look like. So on line one, women's jeans by Ryder Vintage, it's one pair. It cost $100 at today's replacement cost. We sourced that pricing from Macy's, and the depreciation on those jeans for wear and tear and condition are 50% in this example. So the actual cash value goes down to $50. The insurance company pays you $50. And the withheld depreciation is the other $50. So again, until you prove to the insurance company that you've replaced that pair of jeans for $100 or more, they get to keep that $50 depreciation. Again, a lot of work. It is an incredible amount of work. It's almost a full-time job to handle it and get it right. For those of you that have $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 or more in the personal property coverage, you may be getting an advance against that of 20% or 50% even. Some companies will pay 75% advance against the personal property bucket. Well, the strategy there is they've done the math, folks. There's a reason they do it. They are hoping. So for example, let's say that they give you 75% of the personal property number in your policy. And the strategy behind it is that they're hoping that you just walk away, that you get lazy, and you just don't want to do the work it takes to get the other 25%. Well, they get to keep the 25%. So it is nothing more than a strategy. It feels good that they're giving you some money up front, but everything in the insurance world is done deliberately. The questions they ask, the letters they write, it's all deliberately done. It's a very scripted path. Make no mistakes. Your questions should be deliberate. Your answers back to the insurance company should be very deliberate, no different than the way they ask questions. How do I get my withheld depreciation? We covered that already. Hand in the receipts and you'll get the rest back. Next slide is some good tips and tools to help you with the personal property. Keep a pad and pen with you at all times. What we find is that people, we hear it all the time. I woke up at 1 a.m. thinking about what was in the garage. And so your brain works differently. And when you've been displaced, and the bottom line is you want to have that pad and pen available so you can jot down these things and so you don't forget. You could be driving along or you could be walking through a store. Just keep that pad and pen with you. You'd be amazed at what starts to jog your memory as you're walking around or in a store or something like that. Draw out each room one by one. Visualize the drawers, bureaus, closets, including shelves and drawers. Don't forget what was under the bed in the back of the closet, stuffed in the corner of the garages. There's a lot of stuff we accumulate as human beings. And what we find is that people typically undervalue what they own. And it really impacts negatively on your personal property when you just kind of look at it that way. Use family and friends. Let them help you do the research for priced items. You've probably gotten calls from from relatives across the country or friends that heard about your situation. Well, look, if you're doing the inventory and you've got 50, 60, 80 pages started up, and give them a few pages and have them price it out for you, that can help you. People want to help, and that's a good way to get stuff done. Photograph documentation and cloud storage, very important. We see that oftentimes if you've had an event at your home, a holiday, and you look in the background, you see what's on the wall, in the cupboards, on the shelves, whatever. Looking at the building too, what kind of finishes are in the building, that's just as important as well. So those photograph documentation, and from any family or friends that have been over your house, to help you recreate room for room, item for item, what was there. Very, very important. Next slide is the fourth and final bucket of coverage, loss of use. These blue circle and green circle are completely two different options under loss of use. We're going to cover the blue one first, ALE, additional living expense. That's your temporary housing. It covers furniture rental costs, covers increased mileage that you're going to have for going back and forth to the site. You may be living in 2 or 3 towns out because housing's tight. They owe you, I believe it's 54 cents a mile. Now, there's an app out there that I would refer you to. It really is helpful. It's called Mile IQ. Mile IQ. It's, I think, about $4.99 last I checked to buy this app. And what it does is it allows you to track all your mileage. And at the end of the day, when you pull in or before you go to bed, you can swipe right if it's related to the fire mileage, and you can swipe left if it's personal mileage. And so at the end of the process, and then every month it calculates it. Look, you'll be amazed at the end of the claims process, it could add up into thousands of dollars. And we've seen it. So you want to keep track of the mileage, very important. It covers RV and boat storage, animal boarding for those of you with dogs and cats, etc., that the hotels won't take. That's their policy. Then you can board your animals, and it's paid for under this loss of use. Now, some of you have a dollar limit under additional living expense, and others have a time limit. I want to talk about the dollar limit first. For those of you with a dollar limit under loss of use, you have to be very careful. For example, if you only have $100,000 of coverage under this bucket, and you're going to be spending $5,000 a month to live in a temporary house, and including the furniture, well, do the math. How long will that $5,000 last until you run out of the $100,000? So you have to be budget conscious when you have a dollar limit under ALE. You don't want to run out, because if you run out, meaning the insurance company's off the hook, they've paid you to the limit of that $100,000. You're going to be paying rent and a mortgage if you have a mortgage. That can hurt really bad, and that can cause some serious financial distress. So be conscious of the dollar limit under ALE. Now, for those of you with a time limit, most policies give you 24 months. For example, State Farm policy has a 24-month time limit with no dollar limit under ALE. Well, the legislation passed a few years ago, and now it's 36 months. So you automatically, it kicks up to 36 months. Those of you with a dollar limit under ALE have 36 months too, but remember, you're dealing with a budgetary number in that bucket of coverage. Little different. So again, if for those of you with just the time limit and no budget, there's really no worries about running out of money there. As long as your temporary housing is fair and reasonable, there are temp housing companies out there that will work for you to find you suitable housing. The most important thing to remember out of this loss of use is this: your standard of living is to remain the same, period. No more, no less. I know there's a run for housing. We realize that. And you may have to look in other towns. There may be an increased cost due to the firestorm for housing. And if you move into the peninsula, for example, I've seen some people do that. They're paying almost double for what would otherwise be a rent in your rural area. So, these housing vendors can find you housing. Certainly, you can find it on your own, or you can contact a local realtor who may have a beat on the market more so than these out-of-state housing vendors that you may be talking to. The other, the green circle, fair rental value, is what your home would have rented for prior to the fire. Now, there's only a couple of policies out there that I'm aware of currently that still have the language there that will pay you in this method. And what that means is, for example, AAA has it, where they would do comps of what your home would have rented for before the fire. And that's a number, whatever number that is, X we'll call it. And then you have to calculate out the period of restoration. And so you take X times the period of restoration, and they pay you that in usually one lump sum. And you can't go back to the well. And so they're off the hook. You've cut a deal with them under fair rental value, or you may opt to also use the ALE coverage where they'll pay for the landlord, and typically they'll pay the landlord 6 months to 1 year in advance, and then go month to month after that. So after that year's up, you'll be having a conversation with the insurance company about what your plans are to rebuild or permanently relocate. They only owe you for the shortest period of restoration. So the minute you go out and buy a replacement property or you permanently relocate, they're done. They no longer owe you loss of use coverage. That's important to note. The carrier owes you for increased costs due to limited housing. And that basically means that if there's a run on housing, typically you start seeing the rental market creep up dollar-wise. Now, there was a cap put on that of 10%. So that helped out a lot of the firestorm victims that we've seen, because prior to that coming into play, boy, they were doubling and tripling the rents, and it was awful. And so they did put a cap on it of 10% increase. That's pretty much what's happening with the loss of use bucket of coverage and how it works. We hear this a lot. Hey, who can represent you? Well, by law, the attorneys can certainly represent you, and public adjusters can represent you. We're licensed, we're bonded by the Department of Insurance, licensed from state to state. And, but look, the attorneys certainly can represent you, but you don't have a legal problem. You have a valuation problem, and that's where a public adjuster comes into play. Unless the attorney's willing to go up there and go through the rubble field with you and roll up his sleeves and prepare a claim and present it and negotiate it, then I'm not sure that just managing the process is worth it. The difference between an attorney and a public adjuster is certainly that the public adjusting firm will roll up the sleeve, will forensically put together the claim of damage that's a defendable work product, submit it for negotiations, and negotiate on your behalf. And again, so the only two disciplines that can represent you in a fire or in a negotiation with the insurance companies, attorneys, and public adjusters. Contractors cannot, by law, represent or negotiate your claim. Please, please be careful out there, folks. There are some contractors that use predatory practices. If they say, hey, you don't need an attorney, you don't need a public adjuster, we'll talk on your behalf, we'll negotiate the claim, it's illegal. And if the Department of Insurance catches wind of them, that's jail time. And again, please, buyer beware. I would not share any information about your settlement dollars with a contractor. It is none of their business. You will need a contractor. Certainly there's a need for them, but there's a time and a place, and there's a proper way to do it. Don't share any information about your policy with the contractor. Keeps them honest, It'll keep them hungry for your business, and they cannot, again, negotiate for your claim. Insurance agents and brokers are not able to negotiate for you. Senate Bill 488 passed in 2017 that disallowed insurance agents and brokers from negotiating. It's an inherent conflict of interest if you think about it. They sold you the policy. They're an extension, if you will, of the insurance company. So it is important to recognize that they cannot and no longer represent your interest in the negotiations of your insurance claim. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to open up for Q&A. I just do want to mention something. If you get contacted via phone by a public adjusting company, it is unlawful. Please be aware there's a 7-day moratorium. If you're getting a call from a public adjusting company prior to 7 days after the evacuation order is lifted, they're in violation of the law. Just wanted to bring that up to your attention, that there is regulations in place, and we abide by them. Certainly we can take inbound calls, but we cannot solicit outbound calls. Very important to note, folks. Our number is there. If you have questions, I'm going to answer some questions. Please feel free to make an inbound call at any time. Our associates are ready to answer those hard questions that you have questions to. Okay, let me get onto the chat room here and see what we have for questions. Okay, Chris Adams asks, is the 5% for debris calculated off just the basic structure, or is it the structure plus extended replacement and code upgrade? Great question. It's typically off of the base limit. Look at the debris removal clause in your policy under dwelling. It'll be right there in bold. I have not seen, but I can't confirm or deny that they'll take it on the extended replacement cost number. But what I've seen is typically 5% above additional coverage, and is calculated off of the base limit. Great question. Thanks, Chris. Scooby, I love that name. Sorry I had to be late. Is this discussion for total loss only? My home is damaged but not lost. No, it's not. I'll be happy to answer that. If you have what's considered a smoker loss, and that's the, you're one of the homes that have not perished, but you're within the fire zone, and a lot of smoke and radiant heat has gone through your home, you have a claim. I would urge you to, when it's time to, and they open up the area, visit your property before the insurance company does. And here's why. You want to get a good sense for what damages have occurred. And you want to create the narrative with the adjuster in anticipation of your first meeting. Certainly they have the right to come up there. They have to investigate, and you have to cooperate by all means, yes. But it is important that you look around the window frames. If you have vinyl windows, it is hot out there. It's 2,000–3,000 degrees sometimes in these firestorms. And, if you can imagine sitting in front of a fireplace, and that, you can feel even 7, 8, 10 feet away that fire heat. You can imagine what it's like in a firestorm. So your house may be standing, but it may have suffered impact with smoke. And the smoke gets up into the insulation of the attic. You want to look for ash and particulate. The particulate is typically black petroleum-based soot, and it looks like an eyelash if you looked on the horizontals, on the flat surface of maybe your kitchen counter or your bathroom counter. And if you see these little black flecks that look like an eyelash and you run your finger over it, it'll smear. And that's an indication that it's a petroleum-based particulate, carbon, if you would. And so that's going to require a certain type of cleaning. Now, look, if it were me, if you're suffering from asthma or anybody in the home has breathing ailments, there's nothing wrong with requesting an environmental hygienist come in and swab the house, before you start this cleaning process. There's nothing wrong with that, because you want to know that that the cleaning companies are certified to clean that kind of particulate. That's important to know. And again, so if it is a smoker, meaning you have smoke damage, you do have a claim, and that will open up the bucket for loss of use too. Because for those of you that have been evacuated, which is everybody, you initially are under the civil authority 2-week program. And we've been hearing a lot of inbound calls about, hey, it's going to be over 2 weeks. The insurance company's not committing to paying my loss of use. And look, they're right. The insurance company will not commit to that until you have physical loss and damage to the dwelling. If you do have physical loss and damage to the dwelling, then you have a claim, and hence the loss of use bucket opens up for coverage. I hope, Scooby, that answered your question. Okay. Luke Bailey. Hi there. I just learned about this webinar and joined at 7. I apologize if this is a repeat question. How can I obtain a record of this amazing presentation to capture what I missed? Thank you. I'm sorry? We can send it to you. Please provide your email privately, and we will get the recording of this workshop over to you either tonight or first thing tomorrow. We'd be happy to do that. Okay. Luke asks again, my most immediate income need is my loss of rental income from my lodger due to the loss of home. My insurance agent acknowledged that I do have coverage for this in my policy, and I submit the tenant's lease to them. I dearly hope that they will cover the monthly amount of $14.75. Can you please share what you know about situations like this, and if the payment would come from the loss of use bucket? Great question, and I can certainly answer that one. Yes, they do cover the loss of rental income up to the limit of what you have in loss of use. So again, if you had a limitation of $100,000 under loss of use, that not only covers you, but it also covers the loss of rental income. It's not an additional, it is additional, but inclusive of that limit. So until that limit runs out, then they owe you for it. Now, typically, if you don't have a dollar limit, for example, like a State Farm policy, there's 36 months. 36 months is for you and your loss of use, but they do limit the loss of rental income for up to 12 months, typically. So look at the policy language under the loss of use category, and it'll say fair rental value in bold. And in that paragraph, it will discuss what the loss of rental income coverage is, and the verbiage on how the policy responds to it. And again, I believe it is 12 months. Great question, Luke. Thanks for that. That's a good one. Is FEMA considered a subsidized, this is from Gabby, is FEMA considered a subsidized debris removal program? Great question. The answer to that is I don't know. You'd have to ask FEMA. I know that FEMA has a tent usually in some part of downtown or in a fairground. I would visit FEMA, and if you need, sign up for it, find out what all their available programs are. I don't know that the debris removal program has rolled out yet because the fires are still going. I don't even know if they've gotten to 50%, for example, in the CZU, the Santa Cruz Mountain Fire. So my understanding, and typically from experience, we see that some time has to pass before that. When the fire is completely out, then they assess if it's going to be a blanket hazmat scene on every lot. They're going to assess, do we roll out a government subsidized program or do we not? So it's up to the administrations that be, and that's going to take some time. Catherine Wilson writes, I have a reverse mortgage. The policy limits do not cover the amount of the mortgage. I assume I will sign the property over to the mortgage holder, in this case, HUD. Is that correct? That's a good question. I'm not sure. You're going to have to read the mortgagee clause. Look, if you have a mortgage, they're going to be listed on the settlement check. I'm not sure what the clause is in your reverse mortgage contract. There's got to be some kind of a disaster clause that's written into it, because you're not the first one that has this or has had this happen. And so look for the disaster clause in the mortgage agreement, in the reverse mortgage agreement that you have, and see how that relates in response. But I will say that if they are listed on the policy, they will be a named insured as well. A question from Chris and Shana. Will the utility companies repair damage to the underground conduit from poles to the house? Or is this part of an insurance claim? What about underground drainage systems or septic? Does water contamination that prevents drinking, boiling, laundering, and bathing make your home uninhabitable? Well, certainly it does make the home uninhabitable. Let me get to the first part because it's a multi-part question. Will the utility companies repair damage due to underground conduit from the poles to the house? I have seen in some cases, yes. I don't know that your policy talks about underground utilities. Some exclude it, some include it. If you have a deluxe type policy, it may cover underground utilities to the street level. Most of the times they are excluded. So that's something you want to find out in the body of the policy under your dwelling, or specifically under exclusions. The way to look at your policy is, if it's not excluded, it's covered. That's how we approach it. Is it part of the insurance claim? I kind of answered that. What about underground drainage systems or septic? Yeah, those are part of the dwelling. It can be argued that the septic is there to service the house, so it becomes part of the house. It's servicing the dwelling. So yes, that falls under coverage A. Now, making your house uninhabitable due to water contamination. Of course, this happened in Santa Rosa, where benzene got into the water systems, into the water system, and basically they had to rip up all of the the pipes up under the street. It was a disaster, and so they couldn't clean them, certainly, and it was a mess. So they're still working on fixing those things, last I heard. I hope that answered your question, Chris and Shana. Thank you. Scooby writes again, what are the rates and or fee structures for your services? Are these fees regulated? We are regulated by the Department of Insurance. Our fees work like this. If it makes sense to get involved in a claim after a policy review on an inbound call, and we look at all the aspects of it, we work on 10 cents on the dollar. That's what we work on. We get paid on a contingency fee, meaning at the end of the process. And that's how it works. Now, we have different fee structures for different claims. If there's commercial claims, it's different. Homeowner claims and firestorms are 10 cents on the dollar, 10%. Thank you for that question, Scooby. Paul Seiko writes asks to get extended replacement cost coverage. You said that you must prove that the measurable loss of your home is above your base limit, but you must use the depreciated value of the home. How do you figure the depreciated value of your home? Great question. So yes, to open up the extension of coverage, if you have extended cost replacement, you have to prove that the damages are greater than the base limit. So again, I'll use that example. I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. Homes above base limit. So we had an example in slide 1 under dwelling that showed $600,000. There it is. Thank you, Chad. Uh, in this example, let's say you have a measurable loss at replacement cost to your dwelling of $800,000. And everybody agrees. The insurance company agrees, it's defendable, and it's $800,000. Now, the home is subject to depreciation for wear and tear, age, condition, obsolescence. By the way, in California, they cannot depreciate all aspects of the dwelling. Certain components can only be depreciated. For example, framing can last hundreds of years. We know that, so there's no depreciation there. Electrical wiring, that can last 70, 80 years. We've seen it. There's knob and tube wiring in some of these old homes. So there's little depreciation on electrical. Things like labor, you cannot depreciate labor. Things that do depreciate, wall-to-wall carpets, things that you usually, like paint, your paint on the walls, your roof, your roofing asphalt shingles, that can depreciate. So be wary that, or be aware rather, that when depreciation is taken on your dwelling, that they are not depreciating all components on a blanket, just a broad stroke depreciation. You want to ask the adjuster, show me what components you are depreciating. So back to the example, if we have a measurable loss at $800,000, and let's say depreciation is $100,000, now you're at $700,000. You have now opened up the bucket to the extended replacement cost. Excuse me. So as such, now you have an additional $100,000 that you can tap into up to that $300,000. I hope that answers your question. That's kind of how to look at it. And that's a good example of how to open up that bucket of coverage, extended replacement cost, and how to access it. But make sure you know what that percentage is of coverage off of dwelling. Alex, if staying in short-term temporary living situations, such as a hotel, while looking for longer-term temporary housing, will ALE be adjusted? Yes. Most people land in a hotel for maybe a month. It typically takes at least that before you find suitable temporary housing. So if the hotel bill is $5,000 at the end of the month and your food expenses, et cetera, it's $5,000, and then you finally find a house, a residence that you're comfortable and safe in, that's the same standard of living, then it will transition from there over to the temporary house, that the lease again, and such. So the ALE, again, while you're displaced, and if you're couch surfing, if you're at a relative's house or a friend's house, then they are entitled to room and board. Remember that loss of use is a use it or lose it bucket. And you'd be naive to think that if you're saving the insurance company in the loss of use category, that they're going to pay you more in the other buckets of coverage. I've heard that said many times. Well, look, I'm saving the insurance company money. Well, that's very kind of you, but it has no bearing on the other buckets and the claims there. So it is a use it or lose it. It's very important for you to be able to understand how it transitions and what you're entitled to. Hope that answers your question. Luke writes again, I have a long, steep driveway, and I'm concerned that the heavy equipment used for debris removal and house rebuilding will severely damage the driveway. Would insurance cover this potential damage? That's a good one. And the answer, a short answer is yes. However, most people, if they have pavers and expensive driveways they've laid, what they do is they go out and get sheets of plywood, the 8x10s, or just go to Home Depot, and they lay them down and cover the driveway. And that expense should be covered as well by the carrier, because look, it could be argued that if you spend $3,000 in these sheets of plywood to cover and save and mitigate damage, and if you didn't do that and it caused $30,000 in asphalt damage, they're gonna say no problem. Let's go buy those sheets of plywood. So that's an idea. I've seen it done before. But to answer it, yes, that is covered because it's part of the reconstruction. Good question, Luke. Chris and Shana, our adjuster has informed us that he will try to visit our area to assess damage and current state of things. Should we specifically ask that they not go to our property without us being present? Well, look, guys, it's your house. It's your property. Other than the government entities that have access to it, like the fire department and such, and yes, they can do it by all means. But the insurance company adjuster shouldn't just show up on your property. Remember, guys, this is your home, this is your property, and you have a say in on who gets there and when. So what I would do, and what I'm urging you to do, is you get up to the property first and take a look around, and then you can have the adjuster come up via appointment. It's simple. They're going to be in town. And by the way, if you guys have these out-of-state adjusters, which probably most of you do, it's important to recognize that you're going to have multiple adjusters coming in and out of your claim. On average in Santa Rosa, we saw State Farm do about 7 on any one claim. So don't mistake friendliness for a friend, I always say, because they come out, they're gonna try to get your claim resolved, but they want to go home. They're from back east, they're from down south in Texas, all over the place. And so you'd be naive to think that they're going to stay in town for 8 to 12 months or more. They're going to go back home, and then another adjuster will come in. So it is very important for you to memorialize every conversation that you have with those adjusters. Anything that's verbal, I would put it back onto an email, send it off, and put it in the system. Another thing, do not text the adjuster. We saw a lot of that there was texting going back and forth from policyholders to the adjusters. Well, if that information is not in the system, in a State Farm or Farmers or the Safeco corporate system, that can disappear. So the communication has to be memorialized every time. Very, very important. So I hope that answers your question. I wouldn't let anybody go onto my property if it were me without me knowing about it, and it would be scheduled. Scooby writes, to clarify, if the water supply is not potable, is the house considered uninhabitable? Well, quick answer is yes. How is potable defined? State Farm says this is the key defining ALE factor in San Lorenzo Valley. Yeah, you're right. I got to tell you, folks, real quick, I'm hopeful that for those of you that are impacted by the loss of use and you're only subject right now to the civil authority coverage of 2 weeks, you could be out 8 weeks, 2 months. We don't know because it's too soon. And so again, if you don't have physical loss and damage to the property, then they may take a position that the ALE coverage only is good for 2 weeks under civil authority. Now, I would urge all of you to write to your local politician, call the Department of Insurance, start a grassroots movement to address this very problem. It is very, very prevalent in this particular firestorm, more so than any other ones I've seen. And I've been to all of them. Scooby writes, how is the equivalent standard of living defined and or verified and enforced? It's simple. The standard of living is if you have a 2,000 square foot house, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, that's what you're entitled to. If you have a pool in the backyard, well, you're entitled to have a 2,000 square foot house with a pool. If you find something without a pool and you're okay with it, that's great too. So it's what's fair and reasonable. Standard of living is the term that they're using. Look, you can't go from a 2,000 square foot house to a McMansion on the ocean in Santa Cruz at 6,000 square feet. That's not going to fly, folks. So they certainly don't mind if you go smaller. We've had some people that we've talked to that have gone into an 800 square foot house from a 1,200 square foot house because it worked for them and they're okay with that, but they couldn't go any bigger. So remember, it's standard of living is loosely defined, but it's what's fair and reasonable. I hope that answers. And is it enforced? Yeah, the lease is gonna that you hand in for approval to the insurance company is gonna dictate what the amenities are and what you are leasing. So that's what they're looking at. Altera and Hatton, I hope I said that right. State Farm is covering our hotel, but so far has been quite avoidant about paying our emergency replacement or personal items and food. Are these things we are entitled to 10% reimbursement for? To 10% reimbursement for? I'm sorry? Oh, okay. So, well, the question I have is your house burnt to the ground, or is it just it did not perish and it's a smoker? That's what we would need in order to answer that properly. But right now, look, if the insurance company cannot verify that your house is a total constructive loss, then they're going to be not committing to anything more than civil authority. It's not just State Farm, guys. It's all of them. They're sitting back on the sidelines waiting for the area to open up. And upon their visitation, they're able to see if you have physical loss and damage, if your house is still standing, which would trigger your loss of use coverage, and whatever is damaged inside by smoke, et cetera. So you have coverage there. If they go to the property and your house is fine, and you've been out 6 weeks in a hotel, they only owe for the 2 weeks of civil authority coverage. Question by Chris and Shana. They told us that they have credentials to get into the evacuation zone. Wow. He says that an emergency responder, he can get in there before we are allowed in. Well, that's nice. I'm not aware of it. And so it's up to you. I mean, there's nothing to hide, certainly. You can let them up there. If it's going to make a difference, guys, of coverage or no coverage or making a faster coverage decision, then maybe it does make sense. I don't know about this emergency responder thing. I'd be wary about that and find out from your local fire department or police department who they consider an emergency responder. So me as a public adjuster, am I an emergency responder? Can I get through the line? Probably not. So if he's just an insurance adjuster, I don't think that constitutes an emergency responder. I don't know. That's a good question for the authorities. I'm sure it's outlined somewhere. Okay, that's the end of the questions. I hope I was helpful. Oh, there's more Q&A. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Oops, there they are. I see. Okay, we've got more. Kelly writes, how is depreciation calculated based on set percentage or based on time? In the state, great question, Kelly. In the state of California, not only the age of the item is what's considered for depreciation, it's the condition. That's very important. For example, I collect old tube amplifiers. And if I had to claim those tube amplifiers to the insurance company, and some of them are 50 and 60 years old, they would say, we owe you nothing. Those things are depreciated down to zero. I'll give you, 5 cents on the dollar. But my argument is, hey, the condition of these things are in excellent condition because I'm a collector. So now you can only depreciate maybe 5 or 10%. So give me 90 cents on the dollar. So that's how that works. There's not a hard and fast rule. It's based on age and condition. So if you have really old raggedy stuff, then that's going to be depreciated more. If you have an item that's only a month old, there's almost no depreciation taken. Altera writes, at what percentage is payment for the replacement items under the loss of use? Replacement items under loss of use. Well, if you have a loss of use claim, replacement items means the physical items like your personal property. If you have a covered loss there, then they owe for it, either to have it cleaned and deodorized back to pre-loss condition, or if it cannot be brought back to pre-loss condition, then they owe you for total replacement of the item. So under loss of use, it's a completely separate category. That pays for your temporary housing needs. Alex writes, if staying in short-term temporary living situations such as a hotel while looking for longer-term temporary housing, will ALE be adjusted? I think I answered that in the last one. It sounds like a double question, but again, yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. Pauline writes, does lack of potable water also extend to loss of use? That's an unknown right now. I'm not sure. Everybody's tossing that one around. Certainly, the lack of potable water renders the house unlivable. I don't know where it's defined in a homeowner's policy, if at all. So this may be a new ground to look at and explore with the insurance companies. And I think they're all kicking this one around. Allison Brown writes, if you left a car behind and there's smoke or paint damage, I don't think auto insurance covers what homeowners covers it. No, motorized land vehicles are excluded under a homeowner's policy unless they're used to service the land, like an RTV, like an ATV rather, where you have acreage and you have to get over to the other side. Those are covered. Anything that's a registered type vehicle is excluded under the homeowner's policy. I don't see why smoke or paint damage would not be covered under your auto policy. You might want to look into that a little further. We're not licensed to deal with auto policies, but I would find out how that coverage responds. I think we're at the end. Is that it? Yeah. I want to thank everybody for coming on. I hope I was helpful. If you have more questions or you know of a friend or a neighbor that can use some answers that we provide here, please give them our number, our website. Feel free to make an inbound call. We're here to help out. I hope you all hang in there, and thanks for joining me this evening.